If you're between 30 and 55, and you still believe that some people are just born resilient, that they have a kind of inner steel you were never issued at birth, then your brain is running on a story that neuroscience quietly buried years ago. And that story is costing you more than you know. Here's what no one told you. Resilience is not a personality. It's not a trait you got or didn't. It's not the lucky genetics of the friend who lost everything and somehow walked through fire without flinching. Resilience is tissue. It's a circuit. It's a measurable, trainable relationship between two structures in your skull, one that panics and one that decides. And the only reason you feel like you don't have it is that no one ever showed you it was something you build, not something you are. Stay with me through this, because I'm going to show you three things. First, I'm going to show you what's actually happening inside your brain in the moment life hits you. The exact cascade that fires when you get the phone call, the diagnosis, the email that starts with, "We need to talk." Not the feeling, the mechanism, the chemistry you can't see but can absolutely learn to interrupt. Second, I'm going to expose the single most expensive belief you carry about yourself, the quiet assumption that your capacity to handle hard things was decided long ago and can't be changed. That belief feels like humility. It's actually a cage, and by the time we're done, you'll understand why the people you envy for their strength weren't given anything you weren't. And third, this is the one that matters. I'm going to hand you the blueprint, the actual re-engineering, the way you take a brain that's been wired by years of unmanaged stress and slowly, deliberately rewire it to do something it was always capable of doing. Not positive thinking, not affirmations on the mirror, something your nervous system can physically be trained to perform. Let me prove I'm not wasting your time. There's a structure in your brain the size of an almond, buried deep, older than language, older than reason. It's called the amygdala. Its only job is to scan for threat. And here's the part that should stop you cold. It cannot tell the difference between a predator and a past due notice. To the amygdala, a hostile text message and a charging animal are the same event, same alarm, same flood. When it fires, it doesn't ask permission. It sends a signal down through the hypothalamus, to the pituitary, to the adrenal glands sitting on top of your kidneys, and they release cortisol, the stress hormone. Your heart rate climbs, your blood pressure rises, your digestion shuts off, your body prepares to run from a lion that is, in reality, an inbox. For our ancestors, that system saved their lives and then switched off. The lion left, the chemistry cleared. But you don't live in a world that switches off. You live in a world of low-grade, constant, never-resolving threat. The bill, the boss, the headline, the worry that lives in your chest at 3 a.m. And so the alarm never fully goes quiet. The cortisol keeps trickling. And a system designed to protect you for 90 seconds starts to corrode you over 30 years. That corrosion has a name in the data. It shows up as inflammation, as hypertension, as the leading cause of death for men and women in this country, cardiovascular disease, sitting downstream of a brain that forgot how to stand down. Now here's where everyone gets it wrong. They think the goal is to stop the alarm from firing, to become someone who doesn't feel it, to find the people who were born without the fear. Those people don't exist. The resilient ones, the ones who seem unbreakable, their amygdala fires exactly like yours. The phone call lands on them the same way. The difference isn't the alarm. The difference is what fires next. And what fires next is not a gift. It's a trained response. It lives in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that can reach down into the panic and turn the volume from 10 to 2. And that pathway, that exact pathway, gets stronger every single time you use it. Like a muscle. Like the one you've been told you don't have. So the question was never, am I a resilient person? The question is, do you know how to train the circuit? Because by the end of this, you will. Let's look at what you can actually observe. Not the theory. The thing happening in your body right now, today, in the small moments you've stopped noticing. You're at your desk, an email arrives. Before you've even finished reading the subject line, something shifts. Your shoulders climb toward your ears. Your jaw tightens. Your breathing, pay attention to this, gets shallow and moves up into your chest. Your hands go slightly cold. And a thought begins to cycle. The same thought on a loop you can't seem to shut off. You didn't decide any of that. It decided you. That's the first thing to understand about the stress response. It is faster than you. The alarm fires before the thinking brain even arrives. By the time you're aware you're stressed, the chemistry is already in your bloodstream, already doing its work. You are not reacting to the event. You're reacting to a flood that beat you to the scene. Have you ever noticed you can feel stressed before you even know why? That's not a flaw in you. That's the design. The amygdala routes the threat signal on a fast track that bypasses your reasoning entirely. Survival can't wait for a committee meeting. So the body braces first and explains later. Now here's what's observable over time, the part that should concern you. In a healthy response, the alarm fires. You handle the thing, and within minutes, your system returns to baseline. Heart rate down. Breath deepens. Muscles release. That's the design working. But watch what actually happens to most adults. The email gets handled, and the bracing doesn't stop. The shoulders stay up. The shallow breath continues. The mind keeps cycling the same loop an hour later, 2 hours later, in the shower, in the car, at dinner with people you love but can't fully hear, because part of you is still back at that desk. The alarm fired, but nobody told the body the lion was gone. This is the phenomenon, not stress itself. Stress is normal. Stress is even useful. The right amount of pressure is what makes you sharp and alive. The phenomenon is the failure to switch off. The response that was built to be a brief spike has become a low hum that never resolves. You are carrying a small, constant emergency everywhere you go. And you've carried it so long, it feels like your personality. You call yourself a tense person, a worrier, someone who doesn't handle change well. But those aren't traits. Those are descriptions of a nervous system stuck in the on position, a switch that's been held down so long you forgot it was ever a switch. Let me make this concrete. There was a study of primates by a Stanford neuroscientist who spent decades on exactly this question. Why the same biological alarm that saves a zebra fleeing a predator destroys a human being sitting still? The zebra runs, escapes, and grazes minutes later. The stress chemistry already flushed from its body. The human escapes nothing, because the threat was never physical. It was a thought. And you cannot outrun a thought by running. So the chemistry has nowhere to go. It pools. It stays. Watch yourself for one day. Just notice. How many times does the alarm fire over things that pose no actual danger to your body? The slow driver, the unanswered text, the tone in someone's voice. Each one a small hit of the same survival chemistry your ancestors reserved for predators. 20, 30, 50 times a day. A system meant for rare emergencies, running almost continuously. Here's the question that changes everything, and it's the one we open next. If the alarm firing isn't the problem, If even the most resilient people feel it exactly as you do, then where precisely does the damage happen? Because if we can locate it, we can interrupt it. And to interrupt it, you have to go one level deeper, past what you can observe, into why it happens at all, into the chemistry itself. That's where we're going now. So why does this happen? Why does a system this old, this refined by millions of years of survival, turn against the very person it was built to protect? To answer that, you have to meet the machinery. And I promise you, once you see how it actually works, you will never feel powerless in front of your own stress the same way again. It starts with that almond-sized structure, the amygdala. Think of it as a smoke detector. It is not intelligent. It is not nuanced. It does one thing. It screams when it senses smoke, and it does not stop to ask whether the smoke is from a fire or from your toast. Speed is its entire purpose. A smoke detector that paused to analyze would be a smoke detector that lets you burn. When it fires, it triggers a chain with a name. The HPA axis: hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. 3 structures, 1 cascade. The hypothalamus signals the pituitary. The pituitary signals the adrenal glands, and the adrenals release the 2 chemicals that define your stress life: adrenaline, fast and sharp, and cortisol, slow and lingering. Adrenaline is the sprint. Cortisol is the debt. Adrenaline clears in minutes, but cortisol is built to stay in the bloodstream long enough to keep you alert after a threat, scanning for the next one. And in a life of endless small threats, that lingering becomes permanent. You are marinating, day after day, in a hormone meant for emergencies. Here's what chronic cortisol does, and this is the part the data is brutally clear on. It raises blood pressure. It promotes inflammation in the lining of your blood vessels. It disrupts sleep, which removes the one window your brain had to repair itself. And over years, it reshapes the brain itself. It can actually shrink the hippocampus, the structure responsible for memory and for telling the difference between a real threat and a remembered one. The longer you stew, the worse you get at knowing what's actually dangerous. Stress, left unmanaged, makes you worse at judging stress. The cage builds its own bars. But now, the part that matters. The part that turns this from a horror story into a blueprint. There is another structure, the prefrontal cortex. It sits right behind your forehead, and it is the youngest, most sophisticated part of your brain. It is the seat of reason, of perspective, of the capacity to look at a screaming smoke detector and say, "That's toast, not fire." And here is the relationship that determines your entire emotional life. The prefrontal cortex and the amygdala are connected, and they exist in a kind of seesaw. When the amygdala is in full alarm, it actually suppresses the prefrontal cortex. This is why you can't think clearly when you're panicking. It's not a character failure, it's circuitry. The alarm physically muffles the part of you that could calm it down, but the seesaw tips both ways. When you activate the prefrontal cortex deliberately, when you name what you're feeling, when you reframe the threat, when you slow your breath and force the thinking brain back online, it reaches down and suppresses the amygdala. It turns the volume down at the source. This isn't metaphor. It's a measurable shift, visible on brain imaging, from a reactive state to a regulated one. And here is the keystone, the single fact this entire video is built on. That pathway, prefrontal cortex reaching down to quiet the amygdala, is plastic. Every time you fire it, you strengthen it. Neurons that fire together wire together. The circuit you use becomes the circuit that grows, which means the calm you envy in other people is not a temperament they were issued. It is a pathway they have walked so many times it became a highway. You have the same road. Yours might be overgrown, but it is there in every human skull waiting to be cleared. So we now know the why. The alarm fires in everyone. The damage comes from the alarm that never switches off. And the off switch is a trainable circuit you already own, which forces a painful question. If the circuit is trainable, if it was always trainable, then why do so many of us live convinced we simply aren't the resilient type? That belief isn't humility. It's the most expensive error your brain makes. And it's exactly what we take apart next. Here is the belief. Say it to yourself honestly, because some version of it lives in you. Some people are just built for this. I'm not one of them. You've thought it watching someone absorb a blow that would have flattened you. You've thought it about a sibling, a colleague, a stranger in a story. They have something I don't. They were made differently. Resilience is in their wiring, and it was left out of mine. This is the error. And it is the most expensive belief you will ever hold, because it is self-fulfilling in the most literal biological way. Let me show you why it's wrong, and then why it's dangerous. It's wrong because of everything we just established. The calm you see in resilient people is not a trait sitting in their DNA. It's a trained pathway, prefrontal cortex to amygdala, walked so many times it runs automatically. They were not born with a finished highway. They built it, usually without knowing they were building it, through years of circumstances that forced them to use that circuit until it grew strong. Resilience is not a quality you possess. It is a skill you practice. And the science here is not soft. Researchers who study trauma found something that contradicts the entire fixed trait story. When something catastrophic happens to a population, and these are people who, by the fixed view, should split cleanly into the strong and the broken, that is not what the data shows. The majority of people do not collapse. The majority recover. The fraction who develop lasting trauma is real and deserves care, but it is the minority. Most human beings, when struck, find their way through. Read that again. Most people are more resilient than they believe, including you. So if the capacity is already in you, if you are statistically far more likely to recover than to break, why does the belief persist? Why do so many intelligent, capable adults walk around certain they're the fragile exception? Here's the trap. The belief feels like self-knowledge. It feels like you simply being honest about your limits. But watch what it actually does. The moment you decide resilience is a trait you lack, you stop training the circuit. Why would you practice a skill you've already concluded you don't have? You avoid the hard thing. You brace and retreat instead of engaging. And the pathway, the one that only grows through use, sits unused and stays weak, which means the next blow lands on an untrained brain, and you handle it badly. And that becomes the proof. See, I told you I wasn't built for this. Do you see the loop? The belief creates the very evidence that confirms it. You were never not built for this. You simply believed you weren't, and then acted in a way that guaranteed the belief came true. The fixed mindset isn't a description of your limits, it's the architect of them. There's a deeper cruelty here too. The fixed trait story tells you that when you struggle, it's a verdict on who you are, a permanent flaw exposed. So every hard moment becomes not just painful but shameful. You're not only suffering, you're failing a test of character you were told you'd already lost. That shame floods the system with more cortisol, suppresses the prefrontal cortex further, and makes the next response even worse. The belief doesn't just stop you from growing, it actively makes you more fragile. And the people selling you the opposite, just be tougher, just bounce back, just don't let it get to you, are working from the same broken model. They treat resilience as willpower, as a switch you flip by deciding hard enough. It isn't. You cannot will a weak circuit to be strong any more than you can will yourself to lift a weight you've never trained for. Willpower without the pathway is just self-blame with better marketing. So let's bury it. Resilience is not who you are, it's what you do. It's not a gift handed out at birth to the lucky few. It's a road in every human brain, overgrown in some, paved in others, but present in all. The only question that ever mattered is whether you walk it. And to understand what's at stake in that choice, what it actually costs you to keep believing the lie, you need to meet someone who lived inside it. Someone who had every reason to think they were simply the strong type. Until the day the road they never built ran out. There's a 52-year-old man in suburban Ohio, a regional operations director, the kind of person other people describe as unflappable. 30 years in the same industry, 2 kids through college, a reputation earned over decades as the man who didn't crack. When the plant flooded, he was calm. When the layoffs came down and he had to deliver the news, he was steady. People leaned on him precisely because he never seemed to need anyone to lean on. He believed what they believed, that he was simply built this way, strong by nature, issued the steel at birth. And so he never learned the thing this video is about. Why would he? You don't train a muscle you're told you already have. He had never once, in 52 years, deliberately turned a stress response off. He had only ever held it down by sheer will and waited for it to pass. It always passed, until the year it didn't. It started quietly. A reorganization. A new executive above him, younger, who saw his steadiness as resistance to change. The calm that had been his identity was suddenly read as a liability. For the first time in his life, the thing he was praised for became the thing held against him. He didn't have a circuit for this. He had only the will. So he gripped harder. He stopped sleeping well. Not dramatically, just an hour lost here, waking at 4 there. He told himself it was normal. He started carrying the work home in his chest, the cortisol never clearing because he'd never learned to clear it, only to outlast it. But you cannot outlast a thing that doesn't leave. The reorganization didn't end. The pressure became the weather. His wife noticed before he did. He was there at dinner, but not there. Short with the kids when they called. He'd stopped going on the Saturday walks he used to love, because rest felt like exposure now, like taking his hands off the wheel. The unflappable man was flapping hard in a place no one could see, including him, because he had no language for it. In his model of himself, this wasn't possible. Strong people didn't feel this, so he must just need to try harder. That's the trap of the fixed belief, lived out. It doesn't let you ask for help, because needing help would mean you were never the strong type after all. So you suffer in a silence you built yourself. The phone call came on a Tuesday. Not a tragedy. That's the part that haunts me about this one. There was no death, no diagnosis, no catastrophe. It was an ordinary Tuesday, and an ordinary meeting that got moved up, and a routine he'd done 1,000 times. But his nervous system, after months without a single true off switch, after years without ever learning where the switch even was, simply hit a ceiling. His heart started racing in a way it never had. His chest tightened. His vision narrowed. He was certain he was having a heart attack. He wasn't. The emergency room would tell him, hours later, that his heart was fine, that what he'd had was a panic attack, that his blood pressure had been climbing for months, that the man who was built to handle anything had a body that had been quietly screaming for a long, long time. He sat in that hospital bed, 52 years old, And the thing that broke him wasn't the racing heart. It was the question underneath it. If I'm the strong one, if this is who I am, then what just happened to me? He had no answer. Because the answer was never in the question he was asking. He wasn't weak. He had never been weak. He had simply spent 52 years believing resilience was something he was, and so he never built the thing it actually is. He'd been running a marathon on a road he refused to pave, certain that needing to pave it would mean he was never a runner at all. The road ran out on a Tuesday, in a parking lot, for a man who, by every story he'd ever been told about himself, should have been fine. This is the cost no one warns you about, not the dramatic collapse, the quiet one, the strong person who was never strong in the way they thought, only untested until the day the test didn't stop. And that cost is bigger than one frightening afternoon. It compounds silently in places you don't think to look. That's what we count next. Let's count what the belief actually costs. Not the panic attack in the parking lot. That's just the bill arriving. The real cost was being charged for years in currencies you weren't watching. Start with the body, because the body keeps the most honest ledger. Every day that stress response stayed on. Cortisol did its quiet work. Blood pressure climbing a little higher than it should. Vessel walls inflaming. Sleep fragmenting, which removes the only window the brain has to clear metabolic waste and consolidate repair. None of it announces itself. There's no alarm for slow corrosion. You feel fine, right up until the day the data has accumulated into something with a name. And cardiovascular disease, sitting at the end of this road, is the leading cause of death for men and women in this country. Not because of one bad Tuesday, because of 10,000 ordinary ones. Here's what should unsettle you. The damage is invisible by design. You don't get a warning that your unmanaged stress is reshaping your arteries any more than you get a warning that your savings are being drained while you sleep. But the body is only the first ledger. There's a second one, and it's quieter still. Think about presence. The man in Ohio sat at dinner with the people he loved most and wasn't there. His body occupied the chair. His nervous system was still back at the office, still scanning, still bracing. That is the second cost. Every hour of unmanaged stress is an hour stolen from the only life you actually have. The kids called and got the short version of their father. The marriage got the leftover version of the man. He wasn't absent because he didn't love them. He was absent because his prefrontal cortex was suppressed by an alarm he never learned to silence, and you cannot be fully present in a brain that's running from a lion. How many dinners have you sat through while your mind was somewhere else entirely? That's not a scheduling problem. That's a regulation problem. And it's robbing you of the exact moments you're working so hard to provide. There's a third cost, subtler than both. It's the cost to who you become. Chronic stress doesn't just make you tense, it narrows you. Remember the hippocampus shrinking, the brain getting worse at distinguishing real threats from imagined ones. Over time, a stressed brain becomes a suspicious brain. More reactive, quicker to anger, slower to trust, less curious, less playful, less open to the small joys that require a calm nervous system to even register. You don't just lose peace, you slowly lose access to the better version of yourself, the one who could laugh easily, think clearly, love without bracing. The person you'd be without the constant alarm is in there. Chronic stress is the wall between you and him. And here is the cruelest cost of all, the one specific to the fixed belief. When you think resilience is a trait, every one of these losses gets filed under, "That's just who I am." the high blood pressure. I'm just a stressed person. The absence at dinner. I've always been intense. The narrowing. I'm just not as easygoing as I used to be. You don't fight any of it because you've labeled it identity instead of injury. You decorate the cage and call it home. That's what the lie steals last and steals worst. The awareness that any of this could be different. It convinces you the corrosion is character, and a person who believes their suffering is simply their nature has no reason to reach for the one thing that could change it. But it can be different. Everything we've established says so. The alarm fires in everyone, but the off switch is a trainable circuit. The damage comes from the response that never resolves. But the response can be taught to resolve. None of this is fixed. All of it is plastic. You've now seen the mechanism. You've seen the error. You've seen what it costs in a body, in a marriage, in a self. You understand the problem more completely than most people ever will. So it's time. Time to stop describing the cage and start handing you the key. Not a feeling, not a slogan, an actual protocol. The specific, repeatable way you take that overgrown road from prefrontal cortex to amygdala and walk it until it becomes a highway. The re-engineering starts now. Here's the re-engineering. 4 moves. Each one fires the prefrontal cortex to amygdala pathway deliberately so that the circuit grows. You're not managing feelings. You're building tissue. Move 1. Name it. When the alarm fires, the worst thing you can do is feel it wordlessly. A nameless feeling stays in the amygdala, raw and amplifying. But the moment you put language on it, this is fear, this is my threat response firing, you've just activated the prefrontal cortex. Imaging studies show that labeling an emotion measurably reduces amygdala activity. You don't have to fight the feeling. You have to name it. The naming is the off switch beginning to flip. Say it silently, precisely. My alarm is going off, and there is no lion. Move 2. Breathe to the exhale. This one is pure physiology, and it cannot fail if you do it. Your stress response runs on the sympathetic nervous system. Its opposite, the parasympathetic, the brake, is activated by one thing you can control directly: a long, slow exhale. Not a deep breath in, the out. Breathe in for a count of 4, out for a count of 6 or more. The extended exhale physically signals your vagus nerve to slow the heart and lower blood pressure. 5 rounds. That's it. You are reaching into the chemistry with your own breath and turning the dial from 10 toward 2. You felt skeptical reading that, didn't you? Good. Try it once under real stress and the skepticism dies. Move 3. Move the goalpost. When life changes the field, the diagnosis, the loss, the door that closes, the fixed brain keeps aiming at a goal that no longer exists, and the gap between what is and what you demand becomes a permanent stress generator. The trained brain does something else. It accepts the new field and moves the goal. Not giving up. Relocating. The capacity to do this has a name in the research: flexible thinking, and it is the difference between flowing with the river and drowning while you fight the current. Acceptance isn't surrender. It's the prefrontal cortex refusing to keep firing the alarm over a reality it cannot change. Move 4. Build the reserve before you need it. This is the one almost everyone skips. You cannot pave the road during the emergency. You pave it in the calm. Sleep. Movement that raises your heart rate. One real human connection you actually maintain. Time outside. These aren't wellness cliches. Each one independently lowers baseline cortisol and strengthens the regulatory circuit so that when the blow lands, you're reaching into a trained brain instead of an exhausted one. The resilient aren't calm during the crisis because of what they do in the crisis. They're calm because of what they did in the months before it. 4 moves. Name it. Breathe to the exhale. Move the goalpost. Build the reserve. Run them and the circuit grows. Skip them and it withers. That's simple. That biological. Now, if you've made it this far, you're already different from most people who clicked on this. You didn't want the slogan. You wanted the mechanism, the actual wiring, the truth under the comfort. You're the rare one who finishes the hard explanation instead of bouncing to the next easy promise. So subscribe, not for me, but so the next blueprint finds you when you need it. And if something in this is landing in a real place, somewhere under the sternum, you already know exactly why. Now back to it. Because knowing the 4 moves isn't the same as becoming the person who runs them without thinking. There's a gap between the protocol and the transformation. And that gap is where the real change actually happens, quietly over time, in someone who looks nothing like they're fighting for their life. Let me show you what that looks like from the inside. There's a 44-year-old woman in Portland, a pediatric nurse, divorced 2 years, raising a teenage son who'd stopped speaking to her in full sentences. She is not a success story. I want to be careful here, because the temptation is to make her one, and she'd be the first to wave that off. Nothing in her life got dramatically better. She didn't find a new love, or a new career, or a breakthrough. The circumstances stayed hard. What changed was smaller than that, and bigger. When the divorce hit, she'd believed exactly what most people believe, that she simply wasn't a strong person, that some women handle this gracefully and she wasn't one of them. She had the racing nights, the cycling thoughts, the bracing that never let go. She'd decided that was just who she'd become now, a tense, diminished version of herself, permanent. Then somewhere along the way, she learned the thing you just learned, that it wasn't a trait, that it was a circuit, that she could train it. She didn't transform overnight. That's not how circuits work. The first weeks, naming the feeling felt clumsy and fake. The long exhale felt like nothing. But she kept running the moves, the way you'd keep showing up to a gym you didn't yet trust. Name it. Breathe to the exhale. And slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice, the road started to clear. Here's how she knew. Not a triumph. A Tuesday. Her son slammed a door, said something cutting, the kind of thing that used to send her straight into the flood. Heart pounding, throat tight, the whole cascade. And this time, standing in the hallway, she felt the alarm begin to fire exactly as it always had. Same almond-sized scream, same surge, but this time something fired after it. A quiet voice, almost automatic now. This is my threat response. There's no lion. He's 14 and he's hurting. One long exhale, then another, and the wave that used to take an hour to pass crested and broke in about 90 seconds. She knocked on his door. She didn't fix anything, but she came in calm instead of armored, and for the first time in months, he let her sit on the edge of the bed. That's the whole story. That's the transformation. Not a different life, the same life, met by a different nervous system. She'd tell you she's still tired, still worried about money, still grieving a marriage she didn't want to end. The field is exactly as hard as it was. But she stopped aiming at the old goalpost, the marriage that was, the easy son she remembered, the woman she was before. She moved the goal to the field she's actually standing on. And the stress that used to run from morning to night now spikes and clears, the way it was always designed to. What she got back wasn't happiness, exactly. It was room. Space between the alarm and the reaction where a choice could fit. And in that space, slowly, the better version of her started returning. The one who could laugh at something, sit through a dinner fully present, feel a small joy without it being drowned out by the hum. She didn't become someone new. She became someone she already was, underneath the unmanaged chemistry. The road was always there. She just finally walked it enough times to make it a path. Here's what I want you to take from her. And it's not inspiration. It's permission. You don't have to overhaul your life. You don't have to become unbreakable or fearless or one of those mythical people who never feel it. She still feels all of it. The alarm still fires. She just learned what fires next, and she trained it, badly at first, then well, the way anyone trains anything. If she could clear that road in the middle of a divorce, raising a kid who wouldn't talk to her, working double shifts, then the quiet belief you've been carrying, the one that says I'm just not the strong type, was never a fact about you. It was just a road you hadn't walked yet. And what happens when you do walk it, what it changes about who you fundamentally are, is bigger than calmer Tuesdays. That's what we turn to now. Here's what nobody tells you about training this circuit. You think you're learning to manage stress. You're not. You're changing who you are at a level deeper than mood, because identity isn't a fixed thing you discover. It's the accumulated residue of how you've responded to your life over and over until the response becomes the self. The man in Ohio didn't have a tense personality. He had a nervous system that fired the same way 10,000 times until everyone, including him, mistook the pattern for the person. The woman in Portland didn't find a calmer self hiding somewhere. She built one, 90 seconds at a time, by changing what fired after the alarm until the new response became automatic, and the automatic became her. That's the part that should stop you. You are not stuck with who you've been. You are, right now, in the process of becoming whoever your repeated responses are making you. Every time you name the feeling, instead of drowning in it, you're not just calming down. You're casting a vote for who you are. Every long exhale under pressure is a vote. Every time you move the goalpost instead of raging at a field that already changed, a vote. And identity, in the end, is just the tally. Not what you decide you are in a quiet moment. What you repeatedly do in the loud ones. This is why the fixed belief was so expensive. It wasn't just wrong about resilience. It was wrong about you, about whether you're a finished thing or a thing still being written. The plastic brain isn't a nice fact about neurons. It's the most radical permission you'll ever get. That the person you've been is not a sentence. It's a draft. Think about what this dissolves. The shame goes first. If resilience were a trait, every struggle would be evidence of a permanent flaw. But if it's a circuit, then struggling just means the road isn't paved yet. And that's not a verdict. It's a starting point. You stop asking what's wrong with me and start asking which move do I run here. That single shift from character to circuit, from verdict to practice, takes the weight of a lifetime off your back. You were never broken. You were untrained. Those are completely different diagnoses, and only one of them comes with a cure. And then something stranger happens. The hard things stop being purely threats, because every difficult moment is now also a repetition, a chance to fire the circuit, to strengthen the road, to cast another vote for the person you're becoming. I'm not saying you'll welcome pain. You won't. But you'll stop experiencing each crisis as proof of your fragility and start experiencing it as the gym where the strength is actually built. The resilient don't suffer less. They've changed what suffering means. It went from evidence of weakness to the raw material of growth. That reframe is the whole thing. That's the angel in the marble. You are both the block being carved by life and the hand learning to carve. The pressure was always going to come. The diagnosis, the loss, the ordinary Tuesday that hits a ceiling. What changes is that you stop being only the marble, helplessly shaped, and become also the sculptor, deciding what emerges from the shaping. So, who do you become walking this road? Not someone life stops hitting. Someone who has built, in tissue and circuit and repeated choice, the capacity to be hit and remain themselves, to bend without snapping, to feel the full weight of being alive, the fear, the grief, the love that makes you vulnerable to all of it, without being run over by it. That's not a personality you were denied at birth. That's a person you are allowed to build, starting with the very next time your alarm fires. And it will fire. Maybe today, maybe an hour from now. The question this entire conversation comes down to is the one we close on, because by now you already know the answer, even if you've never said it out loud. So let's go back to the beginning, to the belief you walked in with. Some people are just born resilient, and I'm not one of them. You've carried that quietly, maybe for decades. It felt like honesty. It felt like knowing your own limits. And now you understand what it actually was. The single most expensive error your brain ever made. A lie that built the very fragility it claimed to describe. Because there is no resilient type, there never was. There's only a road, running from the part of your brain that panics to the part that decides, present in every human skull ever made. In some people, it's paved smooth from years of forced use. In others, it's overgrown, hidden under the belief that it was never there. But it is there. It is in you, right now, as real as the almond-sized alarm it was built to quiet. And the road only knows one thing. It grows when you walk it. That's the whole science, stripped to the bone. The alarm fires in everyone. The resilient feel the phone call exactly as you do. The damage comes only when the alarm never switches off. And the off switch is not a gift. It's a circuit. A trainable, plastic, buildable circuit that responds to 4 ordinary moves repeated until they become you. Name it. Breathe to the exhale. Move the goalpost. Build the reserve. You don't need to become unbreakable. The unbreakable don't exist, and chasing them was always part of the trap. You need to become trainable, and you already are. You were born that way, the same as everyone you've ever envied for their strength. Now, 2 things before you go, and I mean both. First, if any part of this reached something real in you, send it to 5 people. Not as a favor to me. Because you almost certainly know 5 people right now living inside the exact belief you just put down, bracing through their days, certain they're simply the fragile type, decorating a cage they don't know is unlocked. You can hand them the key in 30 seconds. Do it. Second, leave a comment and make it an honest one. Tell me where your road is right now. Overgrown, half cleared, or finally becoming a path. And tell me what you want the next blueprint to be about, because I read these, and the next video gets built from what you ask for. And then close this, and wait. Because your alarm will fire today. Something small, probably. A text, a tone, a Tuesday. And in the half second after it fires, you'll have a choice you didn't have this morning. Drown in it, like always. Or name it, exhale, and cast one quiet vote for who you're becoming. That half second is everything. That's where the road begins. You were never not built for this. You just hadn't walked it yet.